did. Thank you so much. Great.
Oh,
Beautiful.
Perfect.
We did it. Would you like for me to set up another chair right here?
I think I can probably see it from here.
Okay,
As long as, because it's on this side of the stage, so I think I should be fine.
I wonder if there's some memory to drink.
So I
Oh, down. Yeah. Oh,
It worked. Yay.
Okay, fantastic.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they had Do you know that? Oh.
Hasn't shown up yet. It's true. It's basically it's too big.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah, we did.
I know.
Yeah, I need to
We'll start in 5 minutes.
I don't know, mics need adjusting. Mics on yet? I don't think the mics are on.
They saw them I saw
No, I want to record.
Then I'm like, no,
Y'all know about that? It's like, is it the music or is it like the voice echoing?
constant echoes.
I don't know.
Can we mute the laptop?
Hello, welcome everybody to the launch of I Felt the End Before It Came by Daniel Allen Cox. Before we start, I would love to do a land acknowledgement. Before each of our events, we make sure to acknowledge that our events and bookstores are located on the unceded territory of Tiohtià:ke. Many of us refer to Montreal as our home, but it is named Tiohtià:ke. It has always been a gathering place for many First Nations and continues to be home to a diverse population of Indigenous people. We are grateful that creating and sharing stories has been a part of this land for thousands of years. I will introduce the writers and the book, and then we can start. Daniel Allen Cox grew up with firm lines around what his religion considered unacceptable. Celebrating birthdays and holidays, voting in elections, pursuing higher education, and other forays into independent thought. Their opposition to blood transfusions would have consequences for his mother, just as their stance on homosexuality would for him. But even after years of whispers of his sexual orientation reached his congregation's presiding elder, catalyzing his disassociation, the distinction between in and out isn't always clear. Still, in the midst of a lifelong disentanglement, Cox grapples with the group's cultish tactics, from gaslighting to shunning and the resulting harms, from simmering anger to substance abuse, all while redefining its concepts through a clear lens. Can paradise be a bathhouse, a concert hall, or a room full of books? With great candor and disarming self-awareness, Cox takes readers on a journey from his early days as a solicitous door-to-door preacher in Montreal to a stint in New York City, where he swept up in a scene of photographers and hustlers, blurring the line between art and pornography. The culmination of years spent both processing and avoiding a complicated past, I Felt the End Before It Came reckons with memory and language, just as it provides a blueprint to surviving a litany of Armageddons. Daniel Allen Cox is the author of I Felt the End Before It Came, Memoirs of a Queer Ex-Jehovah's Witness. His essays have appeared in Electric Literature, Literary Hub, Catapult, Tri-Quarterly, The Malahat Review, The Rumpus, Maisonneuve, and elsewhere. His essay, The Glow of Electrum, was named notable in Best American Essays 2021 and was a finalist for a 2021 National Magazine Award. Daniel is the author of 4 novels, nominated for the Lambda Literary Award, the Pharaoh Grumley Award, and the Relay Award. He is past president of the Quebec Writers Federation and lives in Montreal. Heather O'Neill is a novelist, a short story writer, and an essayist. Her more recent best-selling novel, The Lonely Hearts Hotel, won the Paragraph Hugh McClellan Prize for Fiction and was longlisted for the Women's Prize of Fiction and CBC's Canada Reads. Her previous work, which includes Lullabies for Little Criminals, The Girl Who Was Saturday Night, and Daydreams of Angels, has been shortlisted for the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction, the Orange Prize for Fiction, and the Scotiabank Giller Prize 2 years in a row. She has won CBC's Canada Reads and the Danita Green Award. Born and raised in Montreal, O'Neill lives there with her daughter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie, for this warm welcome. I'm so thrilled to be joined by the illustrious, the one and only Heather O'Neill, and the legendary Jordan Goldman, who's going to sell interpreting for the evening. Thank you so much for both being here on this hour this evening. I've launched every one of my books, Metronomy Quarterly, and I think you can see why. I'm so thankful for what they've done all these years, not just for our neighborhood, but also beyond that, and especially in these past 3 years. So please, a huge round of applause for. And thank you for coordinating this evening. Welcome to everyone here who's, I'm just, looking at the audience so I can see my life flashing in front of me, literally, which is amazing. So thanks for that. And especially to people who've flown in. And so we have here with us the author, Ken Harvey, author of this amazing epistolary novel, The Book of Casey there. Please pick it up. And we have also with us Brian and Dallas. Brian, please also check out his writing. And Dallas, please check out her awesome photography. And it's Dallas's birthday today. So. And also cheers to the many folks watching at home. Just to name a few: Alistair, Cam and Sylvie, Ricky, Aileen and Simon, Kathy, Celie, Val, Dolores, and my dear, dear, dear cousin Louise, the first out queer in the family, and definitely one of my role models. So thanks for being here tonight as well. So I think we can have our chat.
Oh, great.
If you like.
Of course. First of all, I just wanted to clear up the idea of a cult. So the Jehovah Witnesses, do you see it as a cult? And how does that differ from a religion?
I spent a few years actually thinking about that very question to prepare for writing this book. And for a number of years, I was afraid to use the word cult, simply because of its power, because of how it can be misunderstood. The author Amanda Montel, author of Cultish, explains how a word like cult is a thought-terminating cliche. Once you hear it, there's a predefined image of what it means. And in the very same way that cults deploy thought-terminating cliches of their own. So the idea is to use language that's a bit more precise to the context. That said, they do check a lot of the boxes on this supposed cult's checklist of different aspects of coercive control. So I use the word sparingly, but I'm also not afraid to use it, especially when I'm describing the experience of someone who's left. I find that the calls not to use that word sometimes come from people that are actually more interested in protecting the group's reputation and also protecting their feelings rather than the experiences of their current or former or departing members. And so it's a bit of a tricky thing, of course.
I was really, you talk a lot in the book and you kind of capture that feeling of being a child in a background that you want to leave, and so many different parents and groups of people do things to kind of entrap their child so that they don't have the future they want. But you grew up in an environment where there was literally no future. You weren't allowed to prepare for it because the Armageddon was happening. So what does that feel like to be a child, but then not, so much of childhood is people telling you the future. So what is it like to have a sense of the world as a child when you catch on fire as an adult, if you're lucky?
Yes, of course. It was actually hard to access that memory because like a lot of the book, if you just do the math, was about 30 years ago. And so accessing the what happened and when is easy, but accessing what I actually thought at the time took a lot of work. It took a lot of long drives, long trips, thinking outside of writing time. And I began to actually remember things like knowing that like all my schoolmates will be dead one day. So like that kind of leads you to wonder how much of myself should I invest in playing with someone who actually might be dead like next week or next month or next year, right? So there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance that creeps in early in childhood, right? And just also taught to be no part of the world, I would cheat, right? So if we had to do some kind of like a Valentine's Day or Christmas arts and crafts activity at school, I would like sew the heart using yarn in this styrofoam food wrapper, but let's say not use red, right? So just like a lot of different cheats around that. And actually, what else can you do when you're trying to reconcile impossible realities, things that don't actually go together, right? And same thing like with Christmas. One of our cheats also was a thing called Present Day, which was basically Christmas, but in summer. So as long as it was in July, it wasn't Christmas. Okay, so.
I found that, I don't know if there's a lot of, is Jehovah's Witness like does it have a huge representation in Montreal? Because there do seem to be a lot of them. Is it?
It is.
Okay, I was always sort of curious. I was like, is there more Jehovah's Witnesses in Montreal than elsewhere?
Oh, I see proportionally.
Yeah, and is there a particular like New York Jehovah's Witness say those are Montreal Jehovah's Witnesses? They do it a little different?
That's a very interesting story. Regionally, yes, actually. So there's about 108,000 witnesses in Canada, but that's a great question about Montreal. I'll have to actually look at those numbers. But anecdotally, since the book that came out last week, I've been contacted by many Ex-Jehovah's Witness Montrealers that are just somehow finding it. And so of course, anecdotally, I have reason to believe that there's a lot, But yeah, definitely there's a lot of regional differences and also a bit of like competition because everyone wants to be doing it right and to be the most pious, right? And so also there's some beliefs that haven't spread to different congregations. And so a few years ago, I was actually talking to like an ex-witness in the States about our fears in the 80s of the swarms of crows in the air. And they're like, oh, why was that a thing? It's like, well, actually, we're taught that these swarms of birds are gathering for the great day of judgment so they could peck out all the eyes and the corpses, at the end.
Do you think, was that the crow thing borrowed from someone else's mythology?
Probably.
Like indigenous mythology or something?
Yeah. And like all of this is of course uncredited. And so this other witness didn't believe me. It's like, well, I never heard that.
And then I guess, just meeting, I remember when I was younger, meeting different Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly who were girls, because I hang out with a lot of girls. And one thing that two of them explained to me in great detail as a traumatic event was having to go before the elders and detail their sexual experiences and desires and any sort of things they had done. And they both described it as feeling as though they were being sexually assaulted because they were young and having to speak to all these older men and talk about their bodies. And so I was interested in how shame and sexuality, particularly as a gay man, and did you have similar experiences where you were sort of forced in front of other people to speak about your sexuality and then criticize, or how did they deal with that with you?
Yeah, with me it was actually very much an exceptional judiciary procedure, and you can thank the patriarchy of the witnesses actually for that. So, as you just mentioned, the situation is a lot worse for women who are just witnesses. And Ali Miller's memoir, the Last Days, describes an excruciating scene of having to describe specific sexual acts and intimate acts to like a group of men, of elders, as they're called, who are judging her, right? So men are subjected to the same kind of thing. So this paternalism is just rampant in the group. I was given a phone hearing, which is extremely unusual, right? To not be convened, and the elder said, it was after hearing me call one of my friends' boyfriends handsome at a bowling alley, and the word got back to him, and he said, "Are you homosexual?" I said, "Yes." And so yes, it was a very exceptional way of treating me.
Oh yeah, to bring it, like, as you just brought up the 80s,
Yeah.
and then there's a chapter on blood. So there's so much around blood. And I think in the 80s, because we both kind of came of age at the same time, and there was so much fear of blood because of the HIV possibly being tainted, and so I was just interested in how the Jehovah's Witnesses, did they jump on this as a sort of evidence that everything they had been saying about the sanctity of blood, or maybe just explain too, like, what is in the blood that we cannot share blood with other people?
Yeah, it's a sacred thing apparently. So it can't be ingested, right? And this is one of the holdouts of the Old Testament that they, for some reason, rigorously police, right? A lot of with their like misogynistic rules. So blood means can be eaten, can be transfused, and they claim to have pioneered, or at least forced, the pioneering of bloodless surgery. At the same time, thousands have died because of it. Right? Yeah, and kind of also, they're at the same time, like a lot of their imagery, like you've all seen these very sensational Watchtower magazine images of people dying, right, for being unbelievers, which is basically an unwitness. And these are blood-drenched scenes, and so
Right.
there's also like a judgment aspect of it as well.
Okay. So when you left the witnesses, it must be so strange because you have such a, like with any sort of structure, it's such a structured childhood, and then you leave that, but then you have no support. So does that leave, what was that like? You moved downtown, and I know that period for many people, when we leave home for the first time at that university age, we go wild because there's no one to tell us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So did you feel as a result of having that structure, that led you into some hedonism, or was that just who you were?
Well, that's a very interesting thing. Was I born a coiled spring,
Yes.
or did someone coil me? And then, well, I had a bit of homework here then to do. But I think there was definitely a bit of like a delayed adolescence, right? Which is used by some to excuse a lot of egregious behavior. In my case, I use it to excuse having a lot of sex in a very short period of time, and then springing quickly into sex work. But I think the audience, because I'm actually looking at you, and I know many of you know the places I used to actually hang out, and so who here, and I'm pointing at a few of you already, so the mic's coming for you, but were you at Sky in the mid-90s? Nodding. Tell us what it was like.
Fun.
Was there sex?
I'm tall.
Oh, very quiet. Was there
Yeah.
sex in the hallway?
Yeah,
In the bathroom?
and the bathroom.
Okay. So had I had this option at the Kingdom Hall, had it, which I'm told certain young members of the congregation did, but I wasn't that furtive, I wasn't that smart. You know, I could have gotten around, but I didn't. And so I had to take this 2-hour trip downtown. So like the 68 bus to the 215 to the Metro of Ducanage, excuse me. And then, of course, on the way back, wait until the Metro opened, and then hope I didn't smoke it.
So that obviously kind of leads us into the sex work, and I'm so interested in that chapter because I was interested in how you found the way you use sex work as a form of empowerment, and that was kind of, so I just wanted you to kind of talk about that.
Sure, yeah. So the Jehovah's Witness views on sex work are not great. They are, and I think I knew that. So was I looking to poke the bear, I guess? Yes, I was, right? Also, you know, something like occurred to me is that this leading a group like that is kind of a lifelong thing, and so, and also not everyone shunned me, and so it's important for me not to cast everyone in the same way. There are super Jehovah's Witnesses who will not bend a single rule, and there are tons, I would say many, who will bend as many rules as they need to keep their own moral code intact. And sometimes that means publicly shutting someone, but secretly talking to them. And so I had a few in each category, right? And as a result, I felt like I had a foot in, right? I was the foot in, which was like, but I don't want to foot in. And so somewhere I just figured out what's the worst thing I can do as far as they're concerned. And I recently bumped into like an old witness friend of mine who we hadn't seen in years, and then the first thing he said was Danny, which so few people call me this. Oh, didn't you go to New York to be gay? Yeah. The second you actually leave the bus station, you turn gay. That's how it works. And yeah, and so it's just interesting to hear the story. And the story hadn't changed. That was the official press release.
But then it's also like you became part of the scene there. It almost seems in each of your stories, it's interesting because you're looking for different families, and then you end up in New York and you kind of meet David LaChapelle, who's a famous fashion photographer, and you describe him having this almost Andy Warhol set. So I feel like that also, did that attract you, like that there was a community that you were all in? Did the hustler world in New York provide you with a community?
We did, and I think I always knew I was an artist, and so I had to find my people, and I've also found them here as well. They're, in fact, half of them are here tonight, right? So I mean, yeah, I definitely needed a way to explore everything I was feeling creatively, including creative ways to have sex and to do it publicly. And at the time as well, I just had landed in the middle of Giuliani's reign, which was at that point quite solidified and quite mercenary and quite anti-trans and quite anti-queer. And I fell in with a bunch of artists, as you do, who are just looking to fight against that. And so, you know, a lot of outdoor things, a lot of actions. You know, I discovered all this had been done before, you know, in ACT UP, and I just looked like a great bunch of people, and it wasn't hard to find.
Yeah. And was it, and so in New York, the kind of that gay art scene, but there's always been a kind of closer link with pornography.
Yeah.
Right, and can you kind of describe a little bit the context of that, the way that photographic art with Robert Mapplethorpe and these kind of guys, and just the boundary between that and pornography kind of blurs. And I feel like that's how it's blurred when you're talking about it too.
Yeah. There's a quote by an author I love, Garth Greenwell, who says in his novel Cleanness, he wanted to write a book that was 100% art and 100% porn.
Mhm.
And so we're at 200% here, Heather,
Yeah.
which doesn't make sense, but that's his point, right? Is to blur the lines. And I think at the time in New York, there was like a political mandate to do that, just because of the mayor closing down Brooklyn museum shows for being obscene, right? Giuliani has done far obscener things in the meantime in his own career and life. And yeah, so there was a political mandate to do that, but also just a total lack of prudishness, like among the artists who were at the shows, who were, shooting their work, and who were painting, who were doing like a live performance. It was a PS 122, and it was, yeah.
Exciting. That's been so exciting, though.
It was exciting.
Off the bus and see that. So
I'm still actually
it's such a great era.
coming
So,
across people that we did the same things, but we never actually spoke. And so I'm still uncovering those things, like hang on a second, you shot that in that magazine? I was in that magazine too. And so, of course, all these are kind of disappearing. And so the print magazine world was a very hedonistic place in New York at the time, and centered in this like little newsstand called the Gem Spot that sold 8 creams as well. And so that's where everyone went to get their magazines. And of course, then it's gone. Brian landed it here in the city a week after the main closed. I know that you're very disappointed about that. So Brian, where will you get your smoking industry?
I honestly don't know. We just have to go plastic for sources.
All right.
Unless anyone has other recommendations.
I'm sure someone here is.
you have all these adventures, but you talk about in the book about your lack of formal education. And I mean, it's like, of course, you're not gonna like go and do BAs and degrees because it's very hard if you don't have a parent or a social structure that encourages you to stay in school, which I think some people don't realize how hard it is to stay in school in university when you don't have that sort of, just like a whole group of people encouraging you to stay. But but the idea of going to university to learn to write is a very modern idea. Like creative writing programs didn't really even exist. And it used to be you went down and had the most crazy epic adventures to have things to write about. And I feel you've almost done that, but do you feel that's lost? That sense of like a writer must, the young writer must leave home and do the most crazy, odd, wonderful things to then have subject matter. But now, do you think that's gone? And do you think that's being taken away somehow in classes?
Oh, wow. Here's a lot here. Okay. We actually have the time for this, so it's okay. I think people are producing, like, I'm seeing writing being done under all kinds of circumstances and like a lot of lockdown writing. Arguably, my book is a lockdown book, and so like a different kind of constraint there, and its own freedoms and its own processes. And so yes, I think the idea of getting into like a prestigious writing school, doing your MFA, stems from a system that has produced a lot of the famous white cis males that we've read and celebrated. And so I don't think that that's the only way. I've tried to prove that a bit wrong.
You've done so.
As a white cis male. But I've also gone back to school, and like I have, you talked about like having a support system in place to make sure that you do well in school. I have that system now, and so yeah, it's all around me, and so I am back at school. I'm doing English literature, not creative writing, but I'm sort of doing something I wanted to do like a long time ago, and so I am a little too eager. I don't bring an apple, but I've never late. And I'm occasionally half an hour early, and so I arrived in the previous class. Stay for the end of it, so I get like pretty well-rounded, half paid for education.
Okay, I'll have one more question for you before I take it to the audience. Because we're talking about education and knowledge, there's so many interesting thinkers that you reference in the book, and I was wondering, because you talk about language too, because you go to Poland as a language teacher and what different languages can allow you to communicate. And we kind of culturally and as writers are, always developing a new language to be able to talk about things. So are there things through reading certain writers that we can talk about now as a society that we didn't have the language for before? Or to ask more simply, are there writers that which writers have really enabled you to speak things that you could not speak?
Oh, this is such a beautiful question. Thank you, Heather. So many writers who just articulated things and set the path. Anything having to do with familial queerphobia and shunning. Sarah Schulman's taught me just like a whack of stuff through her 20 plus books. Like I'm lucky to be talking with her later on in the tour, and I'll need to find an intelligent way, or a semi-intelligent way to go through her catalog and find a line like this, you know? And so I'm doing that right now. When I get stuck now in like a thought pattern or even like a writing pattern, I look for poetry to break the forms. I look for also a form bending work like Matilda Bernstein's Sycamore, who just has a way with language, and her style is language that's in search of other language. And so anything where the answer isn't a given, but it's just a quest. It's a question, often unanswered. I look for. Yeah. So these are just two of like hundreds of people that inspired me. In like a religious context, and of course, Tara Westover's educated, you know, which from her Mormon background and survivalist background, finds ways to talk about learning and the different ways it can occur, right? And the different ways we can look up certain things. In like a witness-specific context, Amber Skora, who's like written so movingly about finding her own language while she was actually teaching and working in China. She's from Vancouver, and so like leaving home helped her to find new language to describe her thoughts, and that led to her leaving the witnesses. And so just things like that have truly such a thing. Your own Heather, if you go to Montreal, I cannot think of a Montreal outside of the work of Henry Mills. Books. It's just like, and your own latest, which is right here. We lost our heads. Please pick up a copy. It talks about Montreal's Golden Mile, but also the Squalid Mile. It's brings a feminist aspect to Montreal literature that I've not seen before, addressing disparities and also pushing against this antiseptic view of the city. And I know none of you are into that here. So please pick it up. It's just a gem.
Oh.
It's that's very fun.
And with that, let's hear from you guys. Who has some questions for Daniel? Yes.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm so excited to read it, and what a great interview. I'm curious about your creative process and how it differed from writing fiction, because you mentioned having to unlock these early memories by taking long drives. I'm wondering if you could share a bit more about how you kind of unearthed or excavated your past to share these stories.
Thank you. Yes. I think. Happy birthday, Daniel.
Oh, yeah.
That's just like a deflection. So. Yeah. So it actually happened in waves, right? It's. I've been doing this book for about 6 years. So you also might say 30, and so it depends on the lens, right? But one lens is 6 years, and with 2 writing grants from Calc, I began to do the first drafts, and the first entry point is actually music, right? So in my heart, I'm a musician, a songwriter. I would never let you hear a song of mine, but if you can hack into my stuff, then please have at it. We'll just ask Mark and Wes, and they'll hit you up with stuff. But I mean, I began by writing about how I was in the band at the time, right? And so I was in a teenage West Island garage band. We were no good. but but like it meant everything to me. And I credit that with actually part of my reaching beyond the dogma, right? And so like we can listen to music and like attend concerts as long as we didn't try to emulate our heroes, our rock stars, right? And so that was the way out. And so I started writing about music, and then listening to more of the music I was actually listening to at the time brought back even like more memories, right? Instead of like, oh, I haven't listened to this record by The Cure in 20 years. I'll do it. It does something to you, right? Yeah. And so, but there were other memories I couldn't really access, like how microphones worked at Kingdom Hall, right? There's a very specific setup in those like nondescript windowless buildings, and it's all about seating like this. In fact, this is a lot like a Kingdom Hall, but minus the awesome books and the mind expanding books, but down to the mic stands and yeah, even like just like the PA system. And how I accessed that was by playing on repeat a huge mistake, Kingdom Melodies, which were like our like mind-numbing hymns, totally plagiarized tunes and lyrics, and so doing that, more of the physical things started coming back. And also, part of the work was just like having the courage to open up old boxes and read like journals of mine. And so I found a journal that I was expecting to be like a gold one, like, wow, 1988, okay, it's gonna be some like shit in it, right? I opened it and I found pages and pages of me reciting what was in the Watchtower magazine that month. So it's either I found everything or I found nothing, but in the nothing, it shows me that like I given my mind over to this hierarchy of people, So even in the nothing, I found like a whole bunch of stuff. I hope that answers the question.
So cool.
Awesome. Happy birthday. Chris, please, yes.
Yeah, so just like sort of bouncing a little bit off what Kendra was asking about how your experience gave you so much material to work with, and she was kind of, and you were talking a little bit about creative arts programs and things like that. I don't think it's polarized, but there's a lot of authors who kind of either say like, oh, it's gotta be you wake up and you write like, Mordecai Richard, you do like 4 to 6 hours a day and you write whether you're inspired or not. And then there's like people like, I don't know, Carol Lapp, who has to do all this crazy stuff in order to generate material. And I know you've had these amazing experiences, but I also know your work ethic towards writing is very systematic. What's the balance and what do you do, for example, when there's just like no inspiration when you get back from work and you're like, oh, now I gotta sit down for 2-3 hours and do something on writing?
Hey, thank you. And congrats on your own book as well, by the way. I don't force myself, so if I'm not, I work in waves and I tell myself to do something 100%, especially if it's in writing, or like at least at 99. And I kind of gorge like a snake, right? I take a big meal and then I work on it. And so if I'm in a wave of working on something, I'll do it every day for like as much as I can spare the time. But I would never force myself to open a computer, stand and write if I have nothing that's actually weighing on my heart that day, you know. So yeah, it's a bit driven by the urgency of the project, yeah. And this project I had deadlines, and so that helps me. That drives me in all the ways I needed. Thanks. Susan.
I have a kind of weird question. You may remember that I'm not from around here. I'm from New York originally. In fact, I was around where you were when you met only a few years earlier in Hell's Kitchen. But anyway, so when I first read about you, I had in my mind, oh yeah, another queer kid growing up in a fundamentalist. And in my mind, he grew up in Alberta or something. And I only recently realized it was actually around here that this all happened. I didn't know this. So it got me to wondering about what was the relationship of the witnesses to the Francophone community? Are there a lot of Francophone witnesses? And if not, was that part of the fun of going to Sky and chatting with, or am I just really off that it was a quite bilingual community and everything?
Actually, we had to share our community halls, and so there was the Anglophone meetings, and there was also, the French meetings, and Spanish as well. And so, we just took turns, and so we had to leave an hour later because the next lady was coming in. But the witnesses are extremely proud of their multilingual conventions, right? So Olympic Stadium, 30 languages, look how global we are, look how anti-racist we are. As if, right? That's a whole other topic. So yeah, there was definitely, he had a lot of influence here. And you're right that the beliefs are formed in the language used. So I'm sure that there's a bit of, despite their renowned uniformity of thought, I'm sure there's a lot of differences in belief that just arise because different language is being used, right? And language is how we think, right? So I'm sure I was informed by that. And also I'm sure it's why some of the community in the States don't know why I believe certain things, because it's traditional.
And it's truly a diverse group. Do they just go out and when you knock on door to door, are you looking for certain types of people? Do they tell you check out vulnerable people, or are
Yes.
you look? And is there a prize kind of one you bring in, and then this one keeps bringing in losers, the fun?
That's a very interesting question. Greg, do you want to answer that question? I feel like you have an answer.
I don't know about the witness side of it, but that proselytizing side of it, you get to go to heaven, God's even happier. Yeah, and you saved someone from eternal damnation.
Yes, exactly. Also, Michelle Siba is here, author of End Time, which I have a copy of, actually. I'll show it to you later. Could also probably answer that question. Yes, in a nutshell. So, as you mentioned, we're not trained how to find vulnerable people, but all of our questions, I say ours if I'm still there, all of their questions, you see, this is my point, right? We're asking about, who's died in your family? Do you want to see them again, right? During the pandemic, there was this global Jehovah's Witness letter writing campaign, and I got several of them in the mail asking, just basically capitalizing on the fear of a pandemic to say, see, Leanne is here, you know, why don't you finally write to us or come to one of our meetings? When my partner Mark's dad died, his mom got a letter in the mail telling her that her husband is still alive. This is predatory behavior.
Yeah.
Absolutely predatory behavior. So I was also guilty of that, obviously, for several years. Now, you asked about prizes. Well, it was like Dunkin' Donuts, right? So we had a very informal point system. This is like pre-Timbits. This is like you know, pre-gift card, pre-punch bowl voucher, but it was a donut system in place, and it had to be Dunkin' Donuts. And so they got the endorsement, and that's probably the only reason why they've actually lasted that long. Honestly, pretty shitty.
Right.
I wonder if you recognize consciously as an adult the influences still, and do you go through your life and you're like, oh, this is a witness thing, or do you feel like that you've completely let all that go?
Amazing question. Yes, it's still there, right? It's still there. I embrace a lot of things like my birthday, for instance, but I'm still a bit hesitant, and so like 3/4 of the audience here has at some point had like a birthday with me where I've been a bit like Donkey, right? It's like, who am I to turn down that love, right? It comes from somewhere else, right? And even working with my editor on this book, like his track change comments were just a whole other book, right? Where even like how I was using certain words, and so I would use the word witness as a verb, and he's like, what do you mean? Because we're trying to say here, observe, you know. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I was using it to mean preach, to witness. But that's not what to witness actually means, right? So, and here I am trying to write a book about this, you know. So I need to get this across in a way where I can be like at least self-aware of that language and of that influence. But I'm always going to be stumbling upon things which I didn't know, right? Like, oh yeah, this is good. And so it's always there, right? Yes, please. Hi.
Daniel, I also came out of the 90s and came from a cultish religion, the Mormons. And I'm wondering how you're feeling now that people are reading the book, because I find I had like my life before and my life after, especially because of shunning. So it's really like, it was a very like strong cut, and also like looking for community and everything. But even if you find new community, they don't really understand what it was like to grow up in that. And now you're opening that door for us to be able to read a bit. So how are you feeling now?
Thanks. Awesome question. Thank you for that. I mean, the door's been opened by other writers, of course, you know, who came before me. But in the past week, I've gotten really like emotional over the messages I'm getting from we're talking Montreal area ex-Jehovah's Witnesses with queer kids who are writing to me and passing my book onto their kids after having read it. Totally unprepared for that. So I guess I didn't realize the numbers of us in you know, former belief systems, you know, or you know, who haven't talked about our experiences. Yeah. And so like it feels amazing. it's a huge responsibility. It's absolutely beautiful to see how people are processing it differently than I do, right? So, with various means of support, less support than I've had in many cases, right? And like in ways that just use different framing, right? So as many ways as there are into indoctrination, there are as many ways out. And so as long as we, I think, recognize that it's always going to be like a tender and complicated kind of work, then we'll be okay. And are there any questions in the chat that we'd like to? So we don't have any other questions. Yes.
I have a question. Like the Catholic religion has shrunk so much in Quebec and in other parts of the world. Like what is, I know it's beyond the scope of a memoir, but like what does the future hold for the Jehovah's Witnesses? Like, are they already shrinking here in Quebec or elsewhere in the world? Like, I can't really imagine. It's just a foreign world to me, but how does it look from your point of view?
Yeah, well, in terms of numbers, they are not growing at the moment, which is a catastrophe for them. That's the end of the world. Is the lack of their numbers growth and shrinking. There are investigations, legal investigations around the world, especially in the UK at the moment, looking into like abuse, unchecked abuse, and policies that just enable a lot of unsupportive behavior around shunning, around child sexual abuse, and it's all being called to light. So they're in crisis at the moment, and they spin that crisis as the beginning of Armageddon. And so everybody has an answer, right? The future in Quebec, I'm not sure, but I have no doubt that they'll at least go down with the ship and try to the very last breath to defy the law, right? To find like new ways around it, to change their doctrines without hoping no one notices, to fit new legal contexts, right? That allow them to keep on doing the work. So they'll do that. But yeah, also like a long history of them Catholics in Quebec, that goes back a while. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's enough for Daniel. I think you've shared a lot.
I'll do a small reading note. Yes.
Oh, reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jordan. So something always on my mind while writing a book about coercive control. It's actually come up in our conversation today. Is how language, the very words inside us, the ones that we use to describe our experiences and our lives and ourselves, can be weaponized and turned against us by those who don't exactly have our best interests at heart, right? And this book was, I think, my effort to try to take back this language and to actually turn it around. So if language can be used against us, so can our speech. And it's actually taken me a while to accept publicly my disfluency, right? And so most of you here in the audience have a huge part in actually helping me do that. And so part of this work has been you teaching me like a thing or two about authenticity, right? And also realizing that this idea of fluency is tied to the idea of perfection. And the idea of perfection is something that comes to me through religion, right? And so I no longer have to embrace fluency. I don't have to embrace perfection anymore. Least of all, hold it inside my mouth. And I definitely will not be doing that tonight. And so I just wanted to read to you from a chapter of the book about stuttering. But I will first take a sip of water if you don't mind. How y'all doing? So, a few surprises. My sister Katrina, where are you, Katrina? Okay, that's Katrina. Go find her after the event. Why? Because she's baked thematically appropriate cookies for you all to take home in doggy bags. And also have, for real.
Those are good cookies.
Yeah. And also we'll have a few bottles of wine with them as well. For you all. So plan your evening accordingly. The glow of electrum. There's no guarantee a stutterer can say their own name. I routinely slip down the rounded edge of my own first initial, unable to climb it easily. When I was younger and someone asked for my name, I sometimes gave them an alias, thinking myself clever to be Eric or Ian or Oliver, free of the consonant I was born with, until I got stuck in the glue trap of the vowel I'd chosen. Now, getting my name out can take a second, a lifetime in speech years. Everyone reads the delay differently. Don't say stuttering, say childhood onset fluency disorder. Thank you, American Psychiatric Association. I'll use whichever comes out first. My mouth became a locus of shame at the kingdom hall. To pass into the kingdom of heaven is not to pass through the eye of a needle, as the Bible says, but rather through the obstacle course of my mouth. My face contorted when I blocked, and my sibilants hissed to a messy end. When I tried to avoid answering questions during Bible study, various congregation members would remind me that Moses had an infirmity of speech and that I should be brave and patient. I was told that in paradise, my stutter would be cured. I was supposed to be grateful that Jehovah loved me despite my speech. In order to give a good witness, when we preached door to door, we were supposed to be eloquent, mellifluous. After all, we were ambassadors of Jehovah, and it would reflect badly on him if we hesitated when speaking to householders, as if we weren't sure of the message that we brought to them. If The Theocratic Ministry School Guidebook, which we studied to refine our preaching skills, told us that the more common causes of lack of fluency are lack of clear thinking and preparation of the material. It can also result from a weak vocabulary or a poor choice of words. There, the problem is particularly serious because in some instances, your audience will literally walk out on you. I gave my first Bible talk when I was 13, just before I was baptized. I read from the book of Ezekiel and explained what it meant, eager to show what I learned by reading the Watchtower magazine. I stood at a wooden lectern that was stained by the sweaty hands of first talks. My own wet fingers stuck to the onion skin Bible pages as I turned to Ezekiel chapter 38. I would have preferred to read from the vision in chapter 1, and their appearance and their structure were just as when a wheel proved to be in the midst of a wheel, and I got to see something like the glow of electrum. This is exactly what you'd find if you looked inside my mouth. Wheels inside wheels, and electrum. An unholy alloy of silver, gold, and traces of copper. You would see the mechanisms of the betweenness of stuttering. It is where words fail that language truly begins. As I expounded from the podium, an elder graded my performance by checking off boxes on the speech council sheet. Volume. Was I expanding loudly enough? Pausing. Perhaps once too often? Repetition for emphasis. You've got to be kidding. Fluency. A word I no longer use. Well, never. Timing. You have no idea what I'm building to in the shadow of that mountain of a word. The speech council sheet was the ultimate scrutiny. There was no more hellish panopticon for a stutterer. And it showed ignorance because the points it listed had no nuance. Not all hesitations are composed of the same materials. Some are opaque, others a barely perceptible half step. A filler word can sound like the real thing. Sometimes the body continues moving through a word, the mouth freezes, but the foot taps on. Or the body can get stuck as a bridge between two concepts, a stop motion work of art. Whatever the case, to observe a stutterer is to time travel. The tetragrammaton, transliterated as YHWH or JHVH in the Roman alphabet, appears in the Bible over 7,000 times. Those who say it's unpronounceable aren't used to substituting more difficult words for easier ones. A stutterer is always ready with a letter replacement. We can mix it up in the first few seconds of trouble. Silences, however, can be squeaks, evasions, hums, or teeth chatters, and not silences at all. They're always embarrassing. When a stutterer tries to insert a meaningful pause, an intentional hesitation, it reads as just another stutter, and often is indecision. I feel that Leonard Cohen understood this when he wrote that his silences were accused of being just another form of poetry. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight, and let's keep talking.
I know, so I was like, oh my god. Yeah.